Dr. Sarah Chen stood before the massive window of her quarters on Concordia Prime, watching ships from 100 different worlds drift past the neutral station. Her reflection stared back at her, a small human woman in a crisp blue diplomatic jacket, clutching a data tablet like a lifeline. In 6 hours, she would stand before the Galactic Council and speak words that would determine Earth's future. No pressure at all. Sarah had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. She had memorized every council species' customs, learned their histories, studied their languages. Earth's application for full council membership had been pending for a decade. Humanity had been granted observer status, allowed to watch and learn but never to vote or truly participate. Today that would change, or humanity would be rejected entirely, pushed back to the edges of known space. She pulled up her presentation one more time, reviewing the slides she had perfected. Human achievements in art, science, philosophy, and diplomacy, evidence of Earth's growing stability after the rocky first contact period. Testimonials from species humanity had aided. It was good. It had to be good, a chime sounded. Time to go. The Grand Assembly Hall took Sarah's breath away every time she entered it. The chamber was enormous, designed to accommodate species ranging from the tiny Pixith who stood barely knee-high to humans, to the massive Thoraxians who required reinforced platforms. The ceiling stretched up into what seemed like infinity, dotted with floating light orbs that mimicked stars, seating arranged in a circle, with the speaker's platform at the center. Sarah made her way to the human delegation's assigned seats. Ambassador Williams gave her an encouraging nod. "You've got this, Sarah. Just speak from the heart." Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one who had to do the speaking. The other delegates were arriving now. Sarah watched them with barely concealed fascination. The crystalline harmonics who communicated through light pulses, the aquatic deeplanders in their water-filled mobility spheres, the insectoid collective, moving as one coordinated group. Each species was strange and wonderful in its own way. Then the Valorians entered, and every conversation in the hall died. They walked with the fluid grace of apex predators, their bodies covered in fur that shifted between deep orange and black stripes. They stood upright like humans but moved like great cats, all coiled muscle and barely contained power. Their faces were tiger-like, with intelligent amber eyes that missed nothing. The lead Valorian stood nearly 8 feet tall, her shoulders broad and powerful. This was Clan Lord Cathara, ruler of the Valorian war host, representative of a species that had dominated the galaxy for 3,000 years. Where Valorians went, others moved aside. Where Valorians spoke, others listened. To offend a Valorian was to court death, not just for yourself, but potentially for your entire world. Sarah noticed something odd. 2 smaller shapes followed Cathara, staying close to her legs. Cubs. Actual Valorian cubs. Each roughly the size of an earth lion with oversized paws and bright, curious eyes. Whispers rippled through the assembly. Bringing cubs to a council session violated protocol. But who would dare tell Cathara that? The Valorian clan lord settled into her reinforced seat, and the cubs immediately began exploring their surroundings, sniffing at equipment and batting at floating data screens. Cathara made a low rumbling sound, and the cubs returned to her side, sitting with barely contained energy. Sarah could see their tails swishing, their ears swiveling to catch every sound. They were young, probably equivalent to human children around 8 or 10 years old. The council speaker, a elderly harmonics named Brightness of Dawn, flickered to life at the center platform. The session begins. We gather to hear Earth's petition for full membership. Dr. Sarah Chen will present humanity's case. Sarah stood, her legs steadier than she expected. She walked to the center platform, placed her tablet on the podium, and looked up at the circle of alien faces watching her. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carried by the hall's perfect acoustics to every seat. "I stand before you representing humanity, a young species seeking to join this great community of worlds." She began her presentation, explaining Earth's history. She spoke of humanity's journey from scattered tribes to a unified world government. She talked about human art, showing images of paintings and sculptures and music that had moved billions. She discussed philosophy, the questions humans had asked about existence and meaning and purpose. The delegates listened politely. Some seemed genuinely interested. Others looked bored, probably having heard similar pitches from dozens of aspiring member species. Sarah pressed on, moving to humanity's scientific achievements. Medical advances. Environmental restoration after Earth's industrial period nearly destroyed its own ecosystem. Space exploration driven by curiosity and wonder. That was when she noticed the cubs watching her. They had left Cathara's side and were sitting at the edge of their section, their large eyes fixed on Sarah. Their ears were pricked forward, their heads tilted slightly. When Sarah gestured while speaking, their eyes followed her hands. When she smiled while describing a human achievement she was particularly proud of, one cub's tail twitched. Cathara noticed too. The clanlord's eyes narrowed, watching the cubs watch Sarah. Her expression was unreadable, but Sarah felt the weight of that predatory gaze. Sarah continued speaking, moving into humanity's diplomatic history. Successful negotiations with multiple species. Aid provided during the Kepler colony disaster. Cultural exchange programs. Every word was true. Every claim backed by documentation. Humanity does not seek council membership from a position of strength or conquest, Sarah said, warming to her conclusion. We seek it from a position of curiosity and hope. We want to learn from you, to contribute what we can, and to be part of something larger than ourselves. She was about to advance to her final slides when movement caught her eye. The cubs were moving again, this time creeping down from the Valorian section toward the speaker's platform. Toward Sarah, the assembly noticed. Delegates froze in their seats. Even the collective, who rarely showed individual reactions, went completely still. Valorian cubs were protected by ancient death oaths. To harm one, even accidentally, meant execution not just for the individual but often for anyone they had close contact with. It was a law older than most species in the council. Cathara was standing now, her body tense. But she did not call the cubs back. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to back away, to give the cubs space. But she was in the middle of humanity's most important presentation. If she showed fear, if she reacted badly, it could doom Earth's petition. So instead, Sarah did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She smiled at the approaching cubs and kept talking. Human civilization was built on our relationships with other species, she said, her voice steady despite the two massive predators now climbing onto the speaker's platform. We learned to live alongside animals, to domesticate some, to protect others. This instinct to connect across species barriers is something we hope to bring to the greater galactic community. The cubs reached her. They were magnificent up close, their fur thick and soft-looking, their eyes bright with intelligence. One sniffed at her leg while the other circled around behind her. Sarah kept presenting even as her pulse pounded in her ears, even as every delegate in the hall watched with held breath to see what would happen next. The smaller of the two cubs pressed its nose against Sarah's hand. The touch was warm, the nose slightly damp. Sarah fought every instinct to pull away. Instead, she kept her hand relaxed and continued, speaking about humanity's history of animal conservation programs. The irony was not lost on her. The larger cub had completed its circle and now sat directly beside her feet, looking up at her face with enormous amber eyes. Sarah could hear a sound coming from both cubs, a low rumbling that vibrated through the air. They were purring. A collective gasp rippled through the assembly. Sarah did not understand the significance, but she could see the effect. Every delegate was leaning forward. Cathara remained standing, her tail now still rather than lashing, her eyes fixed on Sarah with a laser intensity. Sarah advanced to her next slide with a subtle foot movement, not wanting to disturb the cub beside her. She began discussing humanity's philosophical traditions, speaking about compassion and cooperation as founding principles of Earth's unified government. The smaller cub moved closer. It pressed its massive head against Sarah's leg, still purring. The weight was significant. Sarah had to shift slightly to keep her balance, but she managed to do so smoothly, incorporating the movement into a gesture toward her presentation display. She was explaining human literature when the larger cub did something completely unexpected. It rose up on its hind legs, placed its front paws on Sarah's shoulders, and brought its face close to hers. Time seemed to stop. Sarah found herself staring into alien eyes that held surprising depth. The cub's breath was warm on her face. Its claws, each as long as her finger, rested against her jacket. One wrong move from either of them could end badly. "Hello there," Sarah whispered so softly that only the cub could hear. The cub made a chirping sound, almost like a question. Then it rubbed its head against Sarah's cheek, the fur incredibly soft. The purring grew louder. When the cub dropped back down to all fours, it did not move away. Instead, it arranged itself against Sarah's side and began to settle down, still leaning heavily against her. Sarah realized with growing alarm what was about to happen. She had seen this exact behavior before, in a very different context. She had owned cats as a child. She knew this posture, this gradual relaxation, this contentment. The cub was falling asleep. The smaller cub, not wanting to be left out, had climbed up Sarah's back and was now draping itself across her shoulders like the world's largest, most dangerous scarf. Its head rested in the curve of her neck, its purring vibrating through her entire body. Sarah stood frozen on the speaker's platform, a Valorian cub leaning against her legs and another sprawled across her shoulders, both purring loudly enough that the microphones picked it up and broadcast it throughout the hall. She looked at her tablet, at the dozen slides still remaining in her presentation. She looked at the assembly, at faces showing expressions ranging from terror to awe. She looked at Cathara, at the massive Valorian clan lord who had not moved, had not called her cubs back, but whose eyes seemed to bore straight through Sarah's skull. Sarah made a decision. She would complete her presentation. She would not wake these cubs. If this doomed Earth's petition, so be it. But she would not be the human who disturbed sleeping babies, even if those babies were enormous alien predators. She cleared her throat softly. As I was saying, human literature often explores themes of connection and understanding across differences. The weight on her shoulders shifted slightly. Sarah froze, but the cub only adjusted its position to get more comfortable, its head now tucked more firmly against her neck. Within seconds, its purring changed in quality, becoming deeper and more rhythmic. It was fully asleep. Sarah continued, adapting her presentation on the fly. She could not reach her tablet easily without disturbing the cubs. She could not gesture with her hands in her usual animated style. She could barely move at all, so instead she relied on her voice and her memory. She spoke about human history, about the long road from isolation to cooperation. She told stories instead of citing statistics, painting pictures with words since she could not point to charts. She discussed the first time humans had encountered truly alien intelligence and how that moment had changed humanity forever. "We were terrified," Sarah admitted. "That first contact ship arrived and we thought perhaps we were facing an invasion. But instead we found curious neighbors. We learned that the universe was far larger and more wondrous than we had imagined." The cub at her feet had tucked its paws under its body and was now resting its chin on her shoe. Its eyes were closed, its breathing deep and even. Asleep, it looked almost gentle. Though Sarah knew that was a dangerous illusion, she felt something warm and wet on her shoulder. The cub draped across her was drooling slightly in its sleep. Sarah's expensive diplomatic jacket was getting soaked. She did not react. The assembly remained utterly silent except for Sarah's voice. Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. They simply watched this unprecedented scene unfold. Sarah moved to discussing Earth's technological contributions, carefully avoiding topics that might involve sudden loud noises or require her to move too much. She spoke about medical research shared freely with other species, about agricultural techniques that had helped feed struggling colonies, about artistic collaborations that had enriched cultures across the galaxy. Her legs were starting to ache from standing so still. The weight on her shoulders was considerable, and she could feel her muscles beginning to protest. She ignored the discomfort and kept speaking. She told the story of the Kepler colony disaster, when a meteor strike had devastated an outer settlement. Human relief ships had been among the first to arrive, bringing supplies and medical aid with no expectation of payment or favor. Sarah herself had been on one of those ships, had worked alongside delegates from the very species now sitting in this chamber. "We helped, because it was right," Sarah said simply. "Because when someone needs help, you provide it if you can. This is a fundamental human value." The cub on her shoulders made a small sound in its sleep, something between a chirp and a sigh. Sarah instinctively made a soft shushing noise, the same sound she had once used to comfort her childhood pets. The cub settled immediately, nuzzling deeper into the curve of her neck. Cathara's ears flicked forward. Something changed in the clan lord's posture, though Sarah could not identify exactly what. Sarah continued her presentation, speaking about humanity's hopes for the future. She explained Earth's desire not to dominate or conquer, but to participate and contribute. She spoke of the next generation of humans who would grow up knowing the stars, who would see aliens not as threats, but as neighbors and friends. "We understand we are young as civilizations go," Sarah said. "We have much to learn, but we believe we also have something to offer. A perspective shaped by our unique history, a commitment to growth and change, and a genuine desire to be part of this great community." The cub at her feet shifted, stretching one paw out in its sleep. Its claws extended briefly, then retracted. Sarah felt her heart skip, but kept her voice steady. She was nearing the end of her prepared remarks, though she had skipped several of the more technical sections that would have required visual aids. Instead, she focused on the emotional core of humanity's petition. She spoke from the heart, the words coming easier now despite her increasingly uncomfortable position. "We ask you to judge us not by our youth or our mistakes, but by our intentions and our potential. We ask for the chance to prove ourselves worthy of membership in this council. We ask for the opportunity to stand beside you as equals, as partners, as friends." Sarah paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled delegates. "That is what humanity offers. That is what we hope for. That is why we are here." She had reached the end. She stood on the platform, unable to move, with two sleeping Valorian cubs draped on and around her, and waited for what would happen next. The silence in the Grand Assembly Hall was absolute. Sarah stood motionless on the speaker's platform, feeling the rhythmic breathing of two sleeping Valorian cubs, one pressed against her legs, and the other sprawled across her shoulders like a living stole. Her muscles screamed for movement, but she remained perfectly still. The council speaker, Brightness of Dawn, flickered with colors that Sarah had learned indicated confusion. The elderly harmonics clearly had no protocol for this situation. No speaker in council history had completed a presentation while serving as a sleeping surface for protected young of the galaxy's most dangerous predator species. Ambassador Williams looked like he might faint. Several other human delegation members were gripping their seats so hard their knuckles had gone white. They understood the danger. One wrong move, one startled cub, one perceived threat, and the Valorian clan lord would tear Sarah apart before anyone could blink. Yet Cathara still had not moved. She stood in the Valorian section as still as stone, watching Sarah with an intensity that made the human woman's skin prickle. The clan lord's tail hung motionless. Her ears were pricked forward. Her eyes never left Sarah's face. A delegate from the Thornaxian Empire shifted in his seat, the movement producing a loud, scraping sound. The cub on Sarah's shoulders stirred, making a small grumbling noise. Sarah immediately began humming, a soft wordless melody her mother had once sung to her. The sound seemed to soothe the cub, which resettled with a contented sigh and returned to deep sleep. Sarah saw Cathara's eyes widen slightly. It was the first visible reaction the clan lord had shown. "Does the speaker have additional remarks?" Brightness of Dawn asked carefully, as if afraid to speak too loudly. Sarah shook her head minimally, mindful of the cub using her as a pillow. "I believe I have said what needed to be said. I am happy to answer questions, though I apologize if my responses are brief. I would prefer not to disturb our young guests." A ripple of something that might have been amusement passed through portions of the assembly. Sarah had just referred to the cubs as guests, not threats or obstacles, as if having enormous predator infants sleep on you during the most important presentation of your life was perfectly normal and acceptable. A delegate from the collective raised a chitinous limb. The human speaks of cooperation and connection across species. Yet in our observations, humans often struggle to cooperate among themselves. "What makes you confident humanity can integrate into a galactic community?" Sarah considered the question carefully. The cub at her feet was snoring softly now, making small whistling sounds. "You are right that humans have struggled with internal conflicts. We have a history of wars and disagreements, but we also have a history of learning from those mistakes. We created a unified world government, not because it was easy, but because we recognized it was necessary. We learned to see each other as one people despite our differences. That same capacity for growth and adaptation is what we bring to the council." Another delegate spoke, this one from the aquatic Deeplanders. "The Valorian presence in this chamber is unusual. Does the human delegation have concerns about the current situation?" It was a carefully phrased question. The Deeplander was essentially asking if Sarah felt threatened, if she wanted the cubs removed, if the situation made Earth's petition impossible to judge fairly. Sarah looked down at the sleeping cub against her legs, then very carefully turned her head to see the one on her shoulders. "I have no concerns," she said simply. "They are children. They have chosen to rest here. I am honored by their trust." The word trust echoed through the chamber. Several delegates exchanged glances. Sarah did not fully understand the significance, but she could feel the atmosphere in the room shifting. A new voice spoke, deep and resonant. It was the first time the Valorian clan lord had addressed the assembly directly. "Does the human not fear my young?" All eyes turned to Cathara, then back to Sarah. This was clearly a significant moment, though Sarah still did not grasp exactly why. "Fear?" Sarah repeated softly. "Clan Lord Cathara, they are remarkable creatures, strong and beautiful and clearly very intelligent. But they are also young ones who have grown tired and needed rest. I see no reason to fear them, only to respect them and ensure their comfort." Cathara's tail moved then, a slow swish from side to side. "The human realizes my cubs could harm her." It was not a question, but Sarah answered anyway. "Yes, I understand they are powerful even at this age, but they have shown me no aggression, only curiosity and, I hope, acceptance. To respond to that with fear would dishonor their trust." The words came naturally, driven by instinct rather than diplomatic calculation. Sarah was exhausted, physically uncomfortable, and speaking from pure honesty. She had no energy left for carefully constructed political answers. The cub on her shoulders chose that moment to drool more heavily, a small stream of saliva running down Sarah's jacket. Sarah smiled despite herself. "Though I admit they are doing terrible things to my formal wear." A sound rippled through the assembly. It took Sarah a moment to recognize it as laughter, expressed in dozens of different ways by dozens of different species. Even Cathara's mouth opened slightly, showing impressive fangs in what might have been the Valorian version of a smile. An older delegate from the Pixith, a tiny species known for their wisdom, spoke up. "We have heard the humans' presentation. We have seen something unprecedented. I move that we take a short recess before discussion and vote, to allow all parties to consider what has transpired." Brightness of dawn flickered agreement. "The motion is recognized. We will reconvene in 2 standard hours to discuss Earth's petition and cast votes." The delegates began to stand, but slowly, carefully. Nobody wanted to make sudden movements near the sleeping cubs. They filed out of the chamber in unusual silence, many glancing back at the speaker's platform where Sarah remained trapped. Soon only a few beings remained. The human delegation unwilling to leave Sarah alone, a few collective members who seemed fascinated by the situation, and Cathara, who finally moved, descending from the Valorian section with fluid grace. Sarah's heart rate picked up as the massive clan lord approached. Cathara was even more imposing up close, easily 8 feet of pure muscle and predatory power. She moved without sound, her paws landing softly despite their size. Cathara stopped at the edge of the platform, close enough that Sarah could see the individual patterns in her striped fur. "The human has done something unexpected," the clan lord said, her voice a low rumble. "I have tried to do what seemed right," Sarah replied carefully. "I hope I have not offended." "Offended?" Cathara tilted her head, an oddly familiar gesture. "You have done the opposite. You have passed a test that most species fail." Sarah blinked. "Test? My cubs are young, but their instincts are true. They sense what words cannot convey. They sense the heart of a species, the truth beneath diplomacy and carefully prepared speeches." Cathara's amber eyes held Sarah's. "They sense whether a being is truly safe or merely acting safe, whether a species views young as precious or as tools." Understanding dawned. "You brought them deliberately." "I did. Every species that petitions for council membership faces evaluation. Some are tested in battle, others in negotiation. For species that claim to value cooperation and care, as humans do, there is no better test than the judgment of innocent young." Cathara reached out one massive paw and very gently touched the head of the cub sleeping against Sarah's legs. "They have never done this with another species. They have shown curiosity, yes, but never trust, never this." The cub stirred under its mother's touch, opening one eye sleepily. It looked at Cathara, then at Sarah, then nuzzled back against Sarah's leg and returned to sleep. "Your young one was in the middle of an important presentation," Cathara said to the cub, though clearly meaning for Sarah to hear. The human had prepared for years. All her people's hopes rested on her words, and you chose that moment to demand attention and comfort. The clan lord looked at Sarah again. "You could have stepped away. You could have called for assistance. You could have allowed others to remove them. Instead, you adjusted. You continued. You made them your priority without making them feel like a burden." Sarah felt something tight in her chest. "They are children. Of course I would not make them feel unwelcome." "Of course," Cathara repeated, and something in her voice suggested this was the right answer. The human sees what many species do not. That young are not obstacles to be managed but gifts to be cherished. The cub on Sarah's shoulders made a squeaking sound. Cathara's expression softened in a way that transformed her entire face. "And now my daughter drools on you like you are family. An honor she extends to very few." Sarah's legs were trembling now, the strain of standing motionless finally taking its toll. Cathara noticed immediately, her predator eyes missing nothing. "You are in pain," the clan lord observed. It was not a question. "I am managing," Sarah replied, which was not quite a lie. Her muscles burned and her back ached from the uneven weight of the cub draped across her shoulders. But she had endured worse. Probably. She could not quite remember when. Cathara made a sound, low and musical. The cub against Sarah's leg stirred, blinking sleepy eyes. The clan lord spoke in her own language, a series of rumbles and chirps. The cub yawned, showing impressive baby fangs, then reluctantly stood and padded to its mother's side. The sudden absence of weight made Sarah's legs wobble. She locked her knees to stay upright. "And Kira?" Cathara said, looking at the cub still sleeping on Sarah's shoulders. "The human cannot carry you forever, little one." The cub Kira made a disagreeable sound without opening her eyes. Sarah heard herself laugh, a slightly hysterical edge to it. "She is very comfortable, I think." "She is stubborn," Cathara corrected, but there was warmth in her voice. "Like her mother." The clan lord reached up and very gently lifted Kira from Sarah's shoulders. The cub protested, making grumpy chirping sounds, but Cathara simply settled her daughter against her own chest, cradling the large cub as easily as a human might hold a house cat. Sarah's shoulders suddenly free, she nearly collapsed. Ambassador Williams rushed forward, catching her elbow. "Easy there, Dr. Chen, let's get you sitting down." "I am well," Sarah insisted, though she accepted his support gratefully. Her legs felt like jelly, just stood still too long. Cathara watched this interaction with interest. Your elder comes to your aid without being asked. Your pack bonds are strong. "We look after our own," William said, helping Sarah to a seat at the edge of the platform. Dr. Chen did magnificently. "I have never seen anything quite like that." "Nor have we," Cathara agreed. She looked down at Kira, who was still protesting being removed from Sarah. "Hush, daughter. The human needs rest. You can return to her later if she permits." Sarah looked up sharply. "I would be honored, clan lord." The massive Valorian's whiskers twitched. "You do not fear what their affection might mean. My people are not known for casual friendships. When a Valorian claims pack bond, it is for life." "I understand," Sarah said, though she was not entirely sure she did. "But they showed me kindness. They trusted me. I would never reject that gift." Cathara studied Sarah for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She lowered herself to sit on the platform, her cubs immediately crawling over her in a tangle of fur and purrs. "Tell me, Dr. Chen, your presentation spoke of humanity's bond with animals. Explain this to me." Sarah blinked, surprised by the request. The Galactic Council's most powerful delegate was asking her to continue teaching, even though the formal presentation had ended. "Humans evolved alongside many other species on Earth," Sarah began, settling into a more comfortable position. "We were hunters, but we were also hunted. We learned to observe, to understand, to predict the behavior of other creatures. And somewhere along the way we began to form partnerships." Cathara's ears swiveled forward, listening intently. "We domesticated wolves into dogs, wild cats into companions. We learned to communicate across species lines, to read body language and emotion even in beings very different from ourselves. These animals became part of our families. We protected them and they protected us. We loved them." "Love," Cathara repeated. "This is a concept that translates poorly between species. Define it as humans understand it." Sarah thought carefully. Love is choosing someone's well-being as important as your own. It is caring for them when they are vulnerable. It is finding joy in their happiness and pain in their suffering. We love our animal companions because they are not just tools or possessions. They are family. The other cub, whose name Sarah had not yet learned, rolled onto his back across Cathara's lap, exposing his belly in complete trust. Cathara absently scratched his chest and the cub's purring intensified. "This is Takor," Cathara said, indicating the cub. "He is brave and foolish in equal measure. And Kira, she is clever and stubborn. They are my heart." There was such tenderness in the clan lord's voice that Sarah felt her own eyes prickle. "They are beautiful children. You must be very proud. I am, and I am protective. Other species see Valorians as weapons, as conquerors. They see my cubs and think only of the danger they will pose when grown. But you, Dr. Chen, you saw tired children who needed rest. You gave them safety without hesitation." Cathara shifted and both cubs adjusted, remaining in contact with their mother. "Do you know why I truly brought them today?" Sarah shook her head. "Because I needed to know if humanity's words about valuing life and connection were truth or performance. Many species speak beautifully but act differently when tested. Your kind is young, unknown. You could be like the Mandrakians who speak of peace but practice cruelty, or you could be what you claim." The clan lord's gaze was piercing. "My cubs cannot be fooled by pretty words. They sense intent. They sense the core of what a being truly is. And they chose you, Dr. Chen. They claimed you as Safe Pack. In 3,000 years of Valorian presence in this council, that has happened exactly twice before." Sarah felt the weight of this information settle over her. "I did nothing special. I simply allowed them to rest." "You did everything special," Cathara countered. "You were in the most important moment of your species' history. You had spent years preparing. Your people's future hung on your words. And when my cubs interrupted, you chose their comfort over your mission." "I did not choose one over the other," Sarah protested. "I simply did both." "Exactly," Cathara said, and smiled that frightening fanged smile again. "You adapted. You found a way to honor both obligations. This is wisdom that many species never learn. You could have seen my cubs as obstacles. Instead, you saw them as additions to your presentation. You incorporated them, worked around them, made them part of your message rather than a disruption to it." Ambassador Williams was listening to this exchange with barely concealed amazement. Other human delegation members had quietly returned to the chamber and were watching from a respectful distance. Cathara stood, her movements fluid despite the two large cubs clinging to her. "The council will vote in less than 2 hours. Before that happens, I will make my position known to certain key delegates. The Valorian war host has remained neutral on most membership petitions for the last century. We no longer concern ourselves with the small politics of smaller species." She looked directly at Sarah. "But this is different. Humanity has proven something today. You have proven that your words about connection and care are not empty, that your instinct for compassion is genuine, that you possess wisdom alongside your youth." The clan lord's voice rose, carrying through the chamber. "The Valorian war host will not remain neutral on Earth's petition. We will speak and others will listen." Sarah's heart hammered. She could not tell if this was good news or the beginning of disaster. "Clan Lord, Be silent, Dr. Chen, you have spoken enough for one day." But Cathara's tone was almost playful. "Rest now. Let your packmates care for you. When the session resumes, you need only observe. Others will speak for humanity now." The clan lord moved toward the exit, her cubs following. But Kira paused, looking back at Sarah with bright, intelligent eyes. The young Valorian chirped once, a sound that somehow conveyed both affection and promise, then bounded after her mother. When they were gone, Sarah let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Ambassador Williams sat heavily beside her. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I think you just secured Earth's future, but I have no idea how." Sarah laughed, slightly giddy with exhaustion and relief. "I stood very still and let baby sleep on me. That is the extent of my diplomatic genius." "Sometimes," a new voice said, "that is exactly the genius required." They turned to see delegates beginning to return to the chamber. The recess was ending. The real test was about to begin. The grand assembly hall filled quickly as delegates returned from recess. The atmosphere had changed. Where before there had been polite but distant interest in Earth's petition, now there was an electric tension. Conversations happened in hushed whispers. Delegates kept glancing toward the Valorian section, where Cathara sat with her cubs sprawled across her lap, grooming them with long, careful licks. Sarah remained in the human delegation section, trying to process what had happened. Her jacket was stained with cub drool and fur. Her muscles still ached, but her mind was sharp, alert, watching the subtle exchanges happening around the chamber. Ambassador Williams leaned close. The Thornaxian delegation just moved their seats farther from the Mandrakians. The Pixith elder is speaking with the collective. Something is happening. Sarah nodded. She could feel it too. Alliances shifting, positions being reconsidered, all because two cubs had fallen asleep on a human. Brightness of dawn flickered to life at the center of the chamber. The session resumes. We will now hear discussion of Earth's petition for full council membership, followed by a vote. Who wishes to speak first? Cathara stood before the question fully left the speaker's mind. The Valorian war host will speak. The chamber went completely silent. Cathara descended to the speaker's platform with her customary grace, leaving her cubs in the care of two Valorian warriors who had materialized from somewhere. The cubs protested, but obeyed. The clan lord stood at the center of the hall, her presence dominating the space. For 3,000 years, the Valorian war host has guided the council through war and peace. We have stood as protectors, and when necessary, as enforcers. We have remained largely neutral on matters of membership, allowing younger species to prove themselves without our interference. Cathara's voice carried to every corner of the chamber. Today we break that tradition. Today the Valorian war host takes a position on humanity's petition. Sarah felt her breath catch. This was it. The moment that would define Earth's future. Many species have approached this council with claims of peaceful intent. They speak beautiful words about cooperation and harmony. They promise to contribute and learn. These are easy words to say, but we have learned that words alone mean nothing. Action reveals truth. Cathara turned and her eyes found Sarah in the crowd. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before us today to present humanity's case. She came prepared with data, with carefully researched arguments, with diplomatic precision. And then something unexpected happened. My cubs, following their instincts, interrupted her presentation. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably, as if afraid the clan lord was about to describe an insult. They approached the human. They investigated her. And finding her acceptable, they chose to rest upon her, as cubs do only with those they deem safe pack. Cathara's tail swished slowly. Dr. Chen faced a choice in that moment. Her mission or my young. Her carefully prepared presentation, or the comfort of tired cubs. She chose both. She adapted without hesitation. She incorporated my young into her message rather than seeing them as obstacles. She honored them by allowing them to rest while still fulfilling her duty to her people. The clan lord's voice grew stronger. This is not a small thing. This speaks to the core of what humanity truly is. Under pressure, when faced with the unexpected, the human's instinct was not to reject or retreat. It was to accept and adapt, to find a path that honored all involved. Cathara looked around the chamber. My cubs cannot be deceived. They sense what lies beneath words. They sense fear masked as friendliness, or ambition disguised as cooperation. They sense the truth of a being, and they chose the human as safe. They claimed her as pack. A murmur ran through the assembly. Sarah noticed several delegates leaning forward, suddenly more engaged. The Valorian war host endorses Earth's petition for full council membership. We do so not because humanity is perfect or powerful. We do so because they have demonstrated a quality this council desperately needs. The ability to adapt, to incorporate the unexpected, to find wisdom in circumstances rather than rigidly following plans. Cathara's words hit like physical blows. More than this, humanity has shown us they possess genuine compassion, not strategic kindness but instinctive care for the vulnerable. This is rare. This is valuable. This is worthy of our respect and support. The clan lord returned to her seat. The cubs immediately climbed over her and she settled them with obvious affection. Brightness of dawn flickered with colors Sarah had learned indicated surprise. Are there others who wish to speak? The elderly Pixith delegate rose. Despite her tiny size, her voice carried clearly. The Pixith Conclave also endorses Earth's petition. We have watched humanity for many years. They are imperfect, as all young species are. But they learn quickly. They adapt. They grow. What we witnessed today confirms what our observations have suggested. Humanity does not simply speak of cooperation. They embody it. They find ways to honor multiple obligations simultaneously. This is wisdom. A Deeplander representative spoke next. Her voice translated through the water-filled sphere she inhabited. The Deeplanders have worked with human scientists on oceanic research. They are curious, respectful, and genuinely eager to learn rather than simply extract knowledge. We support their membership. One by one, delegates stood to speak. Some raised concerns about humanity's youth or their internal conflicts, but these voices became fewer as others spoke of positive experiences with humans, trade agreements honored, aid freely given, cultural exchanges that enriched all involved. The collective spoke as one voice, their words overlapping in eerie harmony. We calculate the probability of successful human integration at 87%. This exceeds our threshold. We support membership. Even the Thornaxians, known for their militaristic culture, spoke cautiously in favor. Humanity has proven capable warriors when needed, but they do not glorify war. They seek peace but prepare for conflict. This is the mark of wisdom. We do not oppose their petition. Only the Mandrakians spoke against, citing humanity's short galactic presence and questioning whether one moment of performance, with Valorian, Cubs should outweigh concerns about human unpredictability. But their objection fell flat, especially when Cathara fixed them with a stare that made the Mandrakian speaker stumble over his words. Sarah watched it all in a daze. The tide had turned so completely, so quickly, because two cubs had fallen asleep on her. Because she had chosen to let them rest rather than push them away. Because she had acted on instinct rather than calculation. The discussion period has concluded, Brightness of Dawn announced. We will now vote. All in favor of granting Earth full council membership. Lights began to appear throughout the chamber, each representing a delegate's vote. Green for yes, red for no, amber for abstention. Sarah watched the lights bloom like flowers, her heart in her throat. Green, green, green. A sea of green with only scattered red and amber. The count appeared on the central display. 147 in favor. 12 against, 8 abstentions. The motion passes, Brightness of Dawn declared. Earth is granted full council membership, with all rights and responsibilities therein. Welcome, humanity, to the Galactic Council. The chamber erupted. Not in chaos, but in the various expressions of approval and acknowledgement appropriate to each species. The human delegation was on their feet, hugging and laughing and wiping away tears. Ambassador Williams grabbed Sarah in an embrace that lifted her off the ground. You did it, he shouted, laughing. You magnificent, brilliant woman. You actually did it. Sarah found herself laughing too, relief and joy and exhaustion all mixing together. I stood still and let Cub sleep on me. That is all I did. You represented the very best of humanity, Williams said, setting her down but keeping his hands on her shoulders. When tested, you showed compassion and adaptability and grace. You proved every word of your presentation without even trying. Cathara approached, her cubs bounding ahead of her. Before Sarah could react, Kira had reared up and placed her paws on Sarah's shoulders again, rubbing her head against Sarah's face. Takor wound himself around her legs, purring loudly. They wish to mark you, Cathara explained, to ensure all know you are claimed as pack friend to the Valorian war host. Do you accept this honor? Sarah looked at the massive clan lord, at the cubs showering her with affection, at the assembly watching this moment. I accept with gratitude and humility. I am honored to be considered pack friend. Cathara placed one large paw on Sarah's shoulder, careful of her claws. Then know this, Dr. Chen. You and yours are under Valorian protection now. Those who threaten Earth threaten us. Those who aid Earth aid us. This is the bond my cubs have chosen, and we honor their wisdom. The political implications were staggering. Earth had not only gained council membership but had secured the backing of its most powerful military force. All because Sarah had let two tired cubs nap on her. Later, after the official ceremonies and the congratulations and the flurry of diplomatic activity, Sarah found herself alone in her quarters. She looked at her ruined jacket, at the drool stains, and the fur that would probably never completely come out. She should have it cleaned. She should probably have it preserved as a historical artifact. Instead, she hung it carefully in her closet and smiled. Thank you for watching, and comment for next part.